There's a lot going on in the world right now, and we've got a lot to cover. Let's dive right into it, guys. This is another episode of the World's News Round. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. This is REGANELITE here with another episode of the World's News Round. And we start with The Guardian, of all places. I had to drink my own urine to survive. Africans tell of being forced into the desert at the Tunisian border as the EU prepares to send money as part of a £1 billion euro deal of people trying to reach North Africa's detailed border pushbacks. A desperate attempt for the European Union to try and stop some level of flow of migration coming into Europe, and people are desperate. People are absolutely desperate, guys. Migrants from the sub-Saharan Africa have spoken of their horror at being forcibly returned to their remote desert regions where some have died of thirst as they attempt to cross the border into Tunisia. As the European Union's prepared to send money to Tunisia under a €1 billion, that's £870 million migration deal, human rights groups are urging Brussels to take a tougher line on allegations that Tunisian authorities have been pushing people back into desert bordered areas, often with fatal results. According to an official from a major intergovernmental organisation, Tunisian authorities relocated more than 4,000 people in July alone to military buffer zones with borders with Libya and Algeria. About 1,200 were pushed back to Libya's border in the first week of July alone, said the source, who was speaking on condition of autonomy. By late August, the source added, the organisation knew of 7 people who had died of thirst after being pushed back. An NGO worker with refugees puts the estimate between 50 and 70. The Guardian could not independently verify the figure. The new claim comes in stark contrast to the pictures painted last month by Tunisian Interior Minister Kamal Felek, who conceded that little groups of 6 to 12 people were being pushed back but denied any mistreatment or form of collective deportation. It is likely to increase pressure on European lawmakers to raise human rights concerns with the Tunisian authorities as they push ahead with a deal aimed at stemming irregular migration. The agreement is an increasing coming under fire, with German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock last week saying human rights and the rule of law have not been given substantial consideration. In a series of interviews conducted, nearly 50 migrants from Sfax, Zeres, Mediterranean and Tosos, the majority confirmed have been forcibly returned to the desert between late June and late July. In early July, the Tunisian police captured us in Sfax, said Summer, the 28-year-old Nigerian woman. My 2-year-old son and I were taken by some policemen and pushed back into the desert at the Libyan border. My husband was captured by another bodyguard, and I don't know what happened to him. I haven't heard from him since because while they were pushing us back, I lost my phone. That's horrible. Michael, 38, from Ben City, Nigeria, said, they pushed me back 3 times to the desert. The last time at the end of July. The Tunisian border guard beat us, stole our money and cell phones. In the desert we had no water. I had to drink my own urine to survive. The Guardian also spoke to Papo Crepin, a Cameroonian whose wife and daughter, Fatih Dosko, and 6-year-old Marie died in mid-July in a remote part of the Libyan desert after being pushed back by Tunisian authorities. I should have been there in their place, says Crespin, who has since been sent back again to Libya. While the border with Libya has long been the focus of such activity, the border with Algeria, which is less controlled, also seen people pushed back into its vast no man's land, reports Incise. 15 people interviewed by the Guardian said they've been forced back to the Algerian border. They arrested me in Tunis and took me near Kazarine, a border town near Algeria, said Taribo Tabet, 22, from Senegal. They left us on a few kilometres from the border. Then we were ordered to climb a hill. On the other side was Algeria. Problem is when the Algerian guard find you, they push you to Tunisia. Tunisians pushed you. Algerians do the same. People die there. There's not the kind of authority here as opposed to other continents. Like, there's not, unless there's enough pressure from from the EU, from the UN, from America, and from other big nations. The problem is these nations can kind of Tunisia and the Algerians and other nations in these countries, unfortunately, they can do whatever they want unless they're told to. That's the thing. It's very distressing, that is to say the least, guys. Reports of Tunisia removing people from the desert emerged in July when photos suggested that asylum seekers were dying of thirst and extreme heat after allegedly being pushed back by Tunisian authorities started circulating on social media. After the allegations, Tunisia's government faced intense criticism from the international press but denied any wrongdoing. At the beginning, Tunisia dismissed reports of false returns, said Hassan Bougbi, a geography and migration professor at the University of Sousse and Sfax, as well as migration consultant for the government. But little by little, they publicly admitted that some sub-Saharans were blocked on the Tunisian-Libyan border. The question is, who put them there? The Tunisian authorities did. According to figures from Italy's Interior Minister, more than 78,000 people have arrived in Italy by crossing the Mediterranean from North Africa since the beginning of the year, more than double the number of arrivals during the same period in 2022. The majority, 42,719, departed from Tunisia, indicated that the country has surpassed Libya as the main departure point for migrants. The strategic partnership signed between the EU and the Tuns in July, reached after weeks of negotiation, envisaged money being sent to the North African country to combat human trafficking, tighten borders, and support Tunisia's struggling economy. The first payment of the 127 million would be distributed in the coming days, a European Commission spokesperson, Anna Pisco, said last week. This is there does seem to me like a lack of pressure from the EU. There is no talk of where is the UN on this, where are the human rights on this. Those are some questions I have with regards to this story, if any of this is to be true. It could be true, and I'm just thinking, where is the talk? I understand that the EU want to reduce the amount of migrations crossing the channel. I understand that, and Italy are ramping up a huge amount of pressure because they're the ones taking the brunt of it. But these are also human beings that have rights too, that need to be looked after. And it stems back to what we've talked about in the past, guys, about, we have a climate crisis and we have poverty in Africa. We have war-torn conflicts taking place, and unless you deal with these issues, these migrations are only going to continue. Migration will always happen because they happen everywhere. You can't stop migration, but you can reduce it if you help the nations they come from, give them a decent life at least. But if you're not going to do anything about them, if you're not going to help them, you can't complain about them knocking on your door when their house is burning down and they've got nowhere else to go. So I think it's important to put it into that perspective at least, guys. So this one is a bit more of an explainer to what's going on in Asia, guys. We're going very well across over to Asia. This one is from CNN, a bit more of an explanatory one. This is quite a bit of a trek one for me to talk about, but I think it'll be a good lesson learned for the both of us for us all here. So the headline from CNN here is tensions are flaring once more in the South China Sea, and here's why it matters for the world. So that's from Hong Kong in CNN. Maritime disputes across the vast South China Sea have ratcheted up in recent years as an increasingly assertive China military disputed islands and confronts its regional rivals over competing claims in the strategically important and resource-rich waterway, bracketed by China and several Southeast Asian nations as part of the vital economic passage, are claimed by multiple governments, with Beijing asserting ownership over almost all the waterway in defiance of an international court ruling. Over the past 2 decades, China has occupied a number of obscure reefs and atolls far from its shoreline across the South China Sea, building up military installations, including runways and ports. Competing claimants such as Philippines says such actions infringe on their sovereignty and violate maritime law. And the United States agrees. regularly sending its navy destroyers on a freedom of navigation operations close to the continent's islands, leading to fears that the South China Sea could become a flashpoint between the two superpowers. So here's what we need to know. So why does the South China Sea matter? The 1.3 million square mile waterway is vital to international trade, with an estimated third of global shipping worth trillions of dollars passing through each year. It's also home to a vast fertility fishing grounds upon which many lives and livelihoods depend. Much of its economic value remains untapped. However, according to the US Energy Information Agency, the waterway holds at least 190 trillion cubic feet of natural gas and 11 billion barrels of oil. Who controls those resources and how they are exported could have a huge impact on the environment. The South China Sea is home to hundreds of largely uninhabited islands and coral atolls and diverse wildlife at risk from climate change and maritime pollution. So who claims what? There's a map here we'll look at in a moment, guys. Beijing claims indisputed sovereignty almost all of the South China Sea and most of the islands which sandbars within it. They include many features that are hundreds of miles from mainland China. The Philippines, Malaysia, Vietnam, Burundi and Taiwan also hold competing claims. In 2016, an international tribunal in The Hague ruled in favour of the Philippines in a landmark maritime dispute, which concluded that China has no legal basis to claim historic rights to the bulk of the South China Sea. China has ignored the ruling. Malala said Beijing continues to send its maritime militia to Mischief Reef and Scarborough Shoal in the Philippines' exclusive economic zone. In the southern portion of the sea, Spratly Island chain, which Beijing calls the Nashka Island, the archipelago consists of 100 islets and reefs, which 45 are occupied by China, Taiwan, Malaysia, Vietnam, and the Philippines. In the northwestern part of the sea, the paracels known as the Ishka Islands in China, which have been controlled by Beijing since 1974, despite claims from Vietnam and Taiwan. China's ruling Communist Party also claims self-governing Taiwan as its own territory, despite having never controlled it. So let me see if I can get. I'm just going to get this a bit closer to us, so we can have a little bit more closer, guys. Just give me 1 second. Here we go. So this is a bit closer, so we can have a bit closer look. So this is. I'm not sure what the source is. I can't see it, but you can. So in the lines dotted out are what claims to be owned by certain certain people. So you can see there Vietnam, and it's a coloured mark there. When the countries are marked, you can see where they believe their territory, or maritime territory claims. And the dotted red lines, if you can see on the map there, that China is basically claiming all of this territory. China are basically saying all this belongs to us, despite the fact that they're nowhere near that territory, if you can see on the map. So it's a case of them trying to dominate the whole of the South China Sea there, basically. Give me 1 second. I'm just going to fix up a little bit. But yeah, I just think it's very, very dangerous for China to claim such territory, because other nations are entitled to their space too, you know. And I know there's history here, and a history that I don't know as well as others, but like, come on, these nations are entitled to the South China Sea as much as you are. So what does China's naval build-up mean for the sea? So China has built the world's largest naval fleet with more than 340 warships, and until recently has been regarded as a green water navy, operating mostly near the country's shores. But Beijing shipbuilding reveals blue water ambitions. In recent years, it has launched large guided missile destroyers, amphibious assault ships and aircraft carriers with the ability to operate in the open ocean and project power thousands of miles from Beijing. In addition, Western's maritime security experts, along with the Philippines and the US, claim China controls a maritime militia that is hundreds of vessels strong and acts as an unofficial and officially deniable force that Beijing uses to push its territorial claims both in the South China Sea and beyond. The US is not a claimant to the South China Sea, but says the waters are crucial to its national interest and guarantees freedom of the seas worldwide. The US regularly conducts freedom of navigation operations in the South China Sea, saying the US is defending every nation's right to fly, sail, and operate whenever international laws allow. Beijing denounces such operations as illegal. So what has China built in the sea? So most of Beijing's military backup is concentrated along the sparsely and parallel island chains, where sustained land reclamation saw reefs being destroyed and first and then built on. Chinese vessels have been known to encircle various atolls and islets, sending destroyers, apologies I can't pronounce these words, to build artificial islands large enough to harbour tanks and warships. Over the past decade, the PRC has added more than 3,200 acres of land to its 7 occupied outposts in the Spratly Island, which now feature airfields, berthing areas, and resupply facilities to support persistent PRC military and paramilitary presence in the region. US Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense Lindsey Ford told the House Subcommittee earlier this week, referring to China by its official acronym, the People's Republic of China. Beijing's military construction sped up in 2014 as it quietly began massive dredging operations on 7 reefs in the Spratlys. Since then, Beijing has constructed military bases on Sabo Reef, Johnson Reef, Mischief Reef, and Ferry Cross Reef, fortifying its claims on the chain, according to the Asian Maritime Transparency Initiative at the Washington-based Center for Strategic and International Studies. Excuse me. Those facilities, along with Ford, are now brisking with some of China's most advanced weaponry, including stealth fighters. Since early 2018, we've seen a PRC steadily equipped its Spratly Island outputs, including Mischief Reef, Sub Reef, and Ferry Cross, with an increasing array of military capabilities, including advanced anti-ship cruise missiles, long-range surface-to-air missiles, J-20 stealth fighter jets, lasers, jamming equipment, and military radar and signal intelligence capabilities, she said in a prepared statement. China has installed exploratory oil rigs in the Paracels in 2014 that sparked anti-China riots in Vietnam, competing claimant. More recently, cruise ships have taken Chinese tourists to the militarized reef. So this is a satellite image of the Ferry Cross Reef in Spratly Island, captured in March 2009. And you can see in the bottom left-hand corner there, you can see China have set up something there. And this is a runaway and military installation built on the Ferry Cross Relief on August 15, 2018 was when this picture was taken here. So you can see they've taken up significant areas. So why are tensions rising again? Well, under President Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr., the Philippines have taken increasingly assertive steps to protect its claims to the shore in the South China Sea, leading to several confrontations with Chinese vessels in waters off the Philippine Islands. They include standoffs between Chinese Coast Guard and what Marina said are shadowy Chinese maritime militia boats and tiny wooden Philippine fishing vessels. Chinese water cannons blocking the resupply of shipwrecked Philippine military outposts, and a long Filipino diver using a knife to sever a massive floating Chinese barrier. These recent instances in the past year show that China are becoming increasingly aggressive and conflict in its actions against smaller countries like the Philippines. They're just beginning to cross certain lines, said Jay Bowie, a maritime expert at the University of Philippines. The Philippines Coast Guard said it remains committed to upholding the international law, safeguarding the welfare of Filipino fisherfolk, and protecting the rights of the Philippines in its territorial waters. China's foreign ministry has defended the behaviour of its vessels on its waterways and said Beijing will firmly safeguard what it views as territorial sovereignty. But they're not entitled to it, that's the thing, guys. This is the last lot. So what are the global implications? So since taking office in 2022, Philippine President Marcos Jr. has taken a stronger stance over the South China Sea than his predecessor, amid the wider power struggle that's been playing out in the region for years. The South China Sea is widely seen as a potential flashpoint for global conflict, and the recent confrontations between Malaya and Beijing have raised concerns among Western observers for a potential developing into an international incident if China, a global power, decides to act more forcefully against the Philippines, which is a US treaty ally. Washington and Manila are bound by mutual defence treaty signed in 1951 that remains in force, stipulating that both sides would help defend each other if either were attacked by a third party. Marcos has strengthened US relations that have frayed under its predecessor, with the two allies touting potential future joint patrols in the South China Sea. As their partners held their largest military exercise in April 2023, China's Military and Foreign Affairs warned that the US-Philippines military cooperation must not interfere in the South China Sea disputes. The US, however, has condemned China's recent actions in the contested sea and threatened to intervene under its mutual defence treaty obligations if Philippine vessels came under armed attack there. The increasing frequent run-ins between China and the Philippines speak to the new Marcos government's willingness to stand up to Chinese bullying and coercion, said Gregory Poling, director of the Asia Maritime Transparency Initiative. Part of that is certainly attributing to the closer to the US-Philippine alliance, which helps given the Marina the confidence that Beijing will be deterred from overt military forces, lest it evokes the US Mutual Defence Treaty. So, yeah, it's quite a lot to talk about here. Definitely interesting to say the least, guys. So what are my thoughts on that? So, looking at and taking that all in. China are trying to exert way too much power there. It's like, but at the same time, like they're disputing for territory that they don't have a right to. And the thing is, because they have the money, they have the power, they feel that they can kind of bully other nations around them, because the other nations don't have the same forces and the same power and influence in military that they do, which is understandable. Which is why America has to play a vital role in the area, ensuring that those nations are looked after. Obviously, they have a treaty, as it said, as we read there, with the Philippines, so it's different. But I say it's different, but to look after them. I think the Philippine president is probably taking things, is pushing his luck, shall we say. Nobody wants to start a war, but at the same time, China are pushing buttons as well. And the question is, how many buttons they're going to push is the real question. And China does have one of the biggest naval fleets in the world. They've built that up with all the money and the finances that they've had. So, yeah, I'd be a little bit concerned if the tensions, if things get mount any worse there. But the Philippines have a right to defend their territory, as would any other nation. So something is going to give in the end. That is for sure. It is a worrying thing to say the least, guys. This next one, I'm probably not gonna read all of it. It's more, I mean, this story dropped today here, Friday, but I think it's she does deserve a lot of credit for what she has done for the United States, guys. So this is from NBC News. Senator Dianne Feinstein, a trailblazer in the US politics and the longest serving woman in the Senate, has died at 90 years old. She was elected in 1992 and was a vocal gun control advocate who often sought common ground with Republicans, sometimes frustrating her more liberal colleagues. Senator Dianne Feinstein from California, a local advocate of gun control measures, who was known for trying to find common ground with Republicans during her 3 decades in the Senate, has died. Her office confirmed on Friday she was 90 years old. 30 years in the Senate, guys. Senator Feinstein never backed away from a fight from what was just the right time. For what was just right. Apologies. At the same time, she was always willing to work with anyone, even those she disagreed with, even if it meant bettering the lives of Californians or the betterment of our nation, her chief of staff James Sowell said in a statement. There are few women who could be called senators, chairman, mayor, wife, mum and grandmother. Senator Feinstein was a force of nature who made an incredible impact on our country and her home state. Feinstein, the oldest member of the Senate, the longest serving female senator and the longest serving senator from California, announced in February that she planned to retire at the end of 2024. When her term was up, she had faced calls for her resignation over concerns about her health. In San Francisco, she showed enormous poise and courage in the wake of tragedy and became a powerful voice for American values. Serving in the Senate for more than 15 years, I had a front row seat to what Dianne was able to accomplish, President Joe Biden said in a statement. Dianne made her mark on everything from national security to the environment to protecting civil liberties. She made history in so many ways, and our country will benefit from her legacy for generations. 1979, that is, of her. Wow. Feinstein's Senate colleagues paid tribute on Friday to the Senate floor, where her seat was covered by a black cough. Majority Leader Chuck Schumer called Feinstein one of the most amazing people who'd ever graced the Senate and who ever graced the country. She was smart, she was strong, she was brave, he added. She was compassionate, and maybe the traits that stood out most of all was her amazing integrity. Her integrity was a diamond. After Feinstein missed votes in late February, her spokesperson said on March the 1st the senator is in California this week dealing with a health matter and hopes to return to Washington soon. She last voted on Thursday morning, according to the website that tracks Senate votes. The California Democrat was a vocal advocate of gun control measures, championing the assault weapon ban that then President Bill Clinton signed into law in 1994 and pushing the restrictive laws since the ban's expiration in 2004. As chairwoman of the Senate Intelligence Committee, Feinstein led a multi-year review of the CIA's detention and interrogation program, developed after the September 11, 2001 terrorist attack, which led to the legislation barring the use of methods of torture. A centrist Democrat, she was known for trying to find common ground with Republicans, sometimes drawing criticism from her party's liberal members. She partied them on a number of issues, including opposing single-payer government-run healthcare and the ambitions of a Green New Climate proposal, which she argued was politically and physically unfeasible. Those tensions with progressives built to a head during the confirmation hearing of the Supreme Court nominee Amy Coney Barrett in October 2020, when Feinstein hugged Senator Judiciary Committee Chairman Lindsey Graham and thanked him for how he had conducted the hearing. The move had prompted swift calls for Feinstein's ouster as the ranking member of the panel, and she ultimately did step down. Feinstein preferred following Senate traditions than changing them, though she voiced openness in 2021 to potentially altering the filibuster rules if Democrats were unable to pass key parts of their legislative agenda, including voting right reforms, gun controls, and a reauthorization of the landmark Violence Act Against Women's Act. Feinstein faced some pressure to resign in recent years to make way for younger lawmakers. Last April, Feinstein pushed back against the news report in San Francisco Chronicle, citing multiple anonymous colleagues expressing worries that she was mentally unfit to serve. I remain committed to do what I said and I would when I was re-elected in 2018, fight for the Californians, she said then. Republican Democrat reps Katie Porter, Adam Schiff and Barbara Lee are running for Feinstein's seat. Katie Porter is definitely a great candidate. She's very, very strong, really right to the point. She's definitely a strong one. I'm not going to cover any more on this, but I will have the link in the description if you guys want to read more about her. But an amazing woman. She really did have a massive impact in American politics in California, and done a lot of good, and had to make some difficult decisions as well, because you know how toxic American politics are. But it will definitely be keeping an eye on who's going to get her seat, that is for sure, because that's going to be one to keep an eye on, that is for sure, guys. So the next story we've got is going back to Europe, guys. This one from Al Jazeera, and it's a little bit of a worrying one. So the Swedish Prime Minister seeks help from the military as gang violence is rocking the country. At least 11 people have been killed so far this month in a wave of gang violence sweeping across Sweden. Sweden's Prime Minister announced that he will hold talks with the head of the Swedish Armed Forces and the Police Commissioner to discuss ways to stem gang violence following a wave of attacks that resulted in at least 11 people killed so far this month. The Prime Minister Josef Kristersson said that he would meet with Armed Forces Supreme Commander and the National Police Commissioner on Friday to explore how the armed forces can help police their work against criminal gangs. Sweden has never before seen anything like this, Christensen said on Thursday in a rare televised address to the nation. No other country in Europe has seen anything like this, he said. 2 people were killed in a separate shooting in Stockholm on Wednesday, and a woman in her 20s was killed when a bomb tore up a house in Uppsala in early hours of Thursday. It is a difficult time for Sweden, Christensen said in his speech. A 25-year-old woman went to bed last night on a completely ordinary evening, but never got to wake up, he said. We will hunt the gangs and we will defeat the gangs, he added. It was not immediately clear in what capacity the military would get involved in tackling Sweden's gang problems, but previous proposals have forced on soldiers taking over protection duties from police to free up more resources for crime fighting. Getting the military involved in crime fighting would be a highly unusual step for Sweden, but it is understood the severity of the gang violence that has claimed almost a dozen lives across the country so far this month, including teenagers and innocent bystanders. The police estimates that about 30,000 people in Sweden are directly involved with or have ties to gang crime. The violence has also spread from major urban areas to smaller towns where violence crimes are previously rare. The criminal conflicts in Sweden are a serious threat to safety and security of the country, the National Police Commissioner Andres Thornberg said in a statement. More than 60 people have died in shootings last year in Sweden, the highest figure on record. This year is on track to be the same or worse. Swedish media have linked the latest surge in violence to a feud between rival factions of a criminal gang known as the Foxtrot Network. Earlier this week, two powerful blasts ripped through the dwellings in central Sweden, wounding at least 3 people and damaging buildings. Christensen's centre-right government took power last year with a promise to get tough on crime, but has so far not been able to stem the violence. The government and the leftist oppositions have traded accusations over who is to blame for the situation. The opposition said the government has made the country less safe, while Christensen has put the blame on irresponsible migration policies and failed integration under the previous government. Sweden long stood out in Europe along with Germany for having liberal immigration policies and welcomed hundreds of thousands of asylum seekers from the Middle East and Africa. Sweden has since sharply restricted migration levels, citing rising crime levels and other social problems. Yeah, so this is really concerning. If this gang violence obviously has been rising, and is it really linked to migration is the real question we need to ask. And if that is the case, then it does raise more questions about nations wanting to take in migration or future migrations in the future. They were very lenient, Sweden, same with Germany. But the difference is, correct me. People from Germany can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't know what the crime rates are like in Germany. But obviously, Sweden have not been able to cope with it, especially the last 2 years from here. And the fact that you're looking to not directly, it doesn't look like they're directly having the military directly involved, but to kind of advise and support, shall we say, the police in the situation. It doesn't look like it's gone that far, but it may go that far potentially. But it is definitely a cause for concern for the people of Sweden, and the fact that it says in the report here that even it's going as far as outside the cities, that these gang violences are getting worse, and it's been going on for a while. It's very worrying to say the least. That is for sure. Oh dear. Guys, while you're here, also, if you can hit the like button, we greatly appreciate it. And if you can share this across social media platforms, it really does help the channel and the video, guys. So I wanted to get at least one video about what's going on in Nagorno. So I have managed to get one. The problem is a lot of the some of the media outlets haven't been covering it, but let's dive into this one, guys. This is an interesting one from France 24. I don't know how reliable this one is, but it's an interesting headline here. So the headline is Moscow Baku to decide the future of the Russian peacekeeping mission in Nagorno. So the Kremlin said on Monday that the future of the peacekeeping mission in Nagorno would be determined by Russia and Azerbaijan, which last week took control of the territory from Armenian separatists. So since the mission is now on Azerbaijan's territory, this will be a subject of our discussion with the Azerbaijani side, Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov told reporters. this is very concerning. So it looks like Russia have kind of like. I watched a video from BowlerHatMan. He also done a video on what's been happening, and he thinks this could potentially be a full-blown war potentially. And I've got a tingling feeling that could be as well. The blood between these two is deep, and Armenia are not in a very good place right now. That is for sure. They're not in a very good place. I'm going to put a link to his video if you want to check it out for yourself, because I think it was a very good video, very good analysis from BowlerHatMan on his thoughts on the situation. Because while I've been covering it, keeping an eye on it a lot more than he has, his prediction thinking that thinking in the same line as he is that this is nowhere near over, and it could get very worse, and I tend to agree with him. So, Russia deployed nearly 2,000 forces to the Mountainous region in 2020 as part of a ceasefire deal which brokered between Azerbaijan and Armenia that ended 6 weeks of brutal fighting for the control of the territory. Peskov's statement came a day after Moscow said Armenians fleeing Azerbaijani forces retook control of the Nagorno-Karabakh had nothing to fear. Kabash? I can't say it right, guys, you know me. I say Nagaro. It's difficult to say who's to blame for the exodus, and there is no direct reason for such action, Peskov told reporters on Tuesday. What, for the exodus? Apart from them threatening to ethnically cleanse them? Obviously they didn't see that bit, did they, in their report? People are nonetheless expressing a desire to leave. Those who make such a decision should be provided with normal living conditions. Yeah, excuse me. Excuse me. Just because I'm drinking a lot of water, guys, sorry. Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan has warned of ethnic cleansing in the region and called for the international community to act. Pashinyan had criticised the Russian peacekeeping force for failing to intervene when Azerbaijan launched its lightning offensive to regain control of the region. Russia have denied the accusations. There are reports of Russian peacekeepers were killed. Russians were killed by Azerbaijanis. Where's the outrage for the Russians, for the Russian government and the Kremlin? Their people were killed, peacekeepers. There were reports. There's complete silence from them. The exodus of ethnic Armenians from the enclave marks a fundamental shift in ethnic controls of land disputed by mostly Christian Armenians and predominantly Muslim Azerbaijanians for the past century. The UN Refugee Agency is ready for 120,000 refugees in Armenia. The UN Refugee Agency on Friday said more than 88,000 people have crossed into Armenia from Nagaro, and the total could reach 120,000, a figure matching estimates of the entire population of the breakaway region. Kavani, representing in Armenia, told the UN press briefing by video link that huge crowds of tired and frightened people were gathering at registration centres. This is a situation where they've lived under 9 months of blockage, she said. And when they come in, they're going to be full of anxiety, they're scared, they're frightened, and they want answers. We are ready to cope with up to 120,000 people. It's very hard to predict how many will come at this juncture, she added in response to a question about refugee numbers. Initial planning figures were between 70 to 90,000 refugees, but that needs updating, she added. Nearly a third of refugees are children, another UN official told the briefing. The major concern for us is that many of them have been separated from their families, said Regina Dortomos, UNICEF regional director. The International Federation of Red Cross and Red Crescent Society representative Dianne Feinstein said there is a massive need for mental health support for refugees. The situation often involves families arriving with children so weak that they have fainted in their parents' arm, he said. Yeah, this is not going to go away anytime soon, as you guys know. I am concerned. I am really, really concerned about those who are choosing to stay in Nagaro. I'm incredibly concerned about their well-being. I really, really am. I'm worried that they may be raped, they may be pillaged, they may be murdered. There have been some really, really dark reports of things that Azerbaijanis have been doing in the territory already, and it feels like the West are silent on the matter, and it is very worrying. Like, I know the UK gets its oil from Azerbaijan, which is why they're not talking. I don't know what America's position on this is. I haven't. Correct me if I'm wrong. If someone's seen a position from America, let me know. But it is very worrying, to say the least, guys. Ah, dear. So we got 2 more stories to cover, guys. The next one we have here. So this one's from Reuters, going all the way back over to America, but this is on the Mexico-America border. Issues taking place there, obviously. This is from Reuters. Insight: the migrants are being raped at the Mexico border as they await entry to the US. So when Catalina's captors arrived at dawn to pull out of her thatched house in the Mexico border of Reneron in late May, she thought they were going to force her to call her family in Venezuela again to beg them to pay for a $2,000 ransom. Instead, one of the men shoved her into a broken down packed bus outside and raped her, she told Reuters. It's the saddest, most horrible thing that can happen to a person, Carolina said. A migrant advocate who assisted Carolina after the kidnapping, who spoke to Reuters on the condition of autonomy due to security concerns, confirmed all the details of her account. These attacks came amidst an increase in sexual violence against migrants at the border cities of Reserva and Matamoros, both major transits for international international transit routes for immigrants seeking to enter the US, according to the data from Mexico's government and humanitarian groups, as well as interviews with 8 sexual assault survivors and more than a dozen local aid workers. The inhumane way smugglers abuse, extort and perpetrate violence against migrants for profit is criminally and morally reprehensible. It's outrageous, pretty much, guys. The US Department of Homeland Security spokesperson Luis Mara said in response to questions about the rise in report rapes. Criminal investigations into rapes and foreign nationals, excluding Americans, were the highest on record in the 2 cities this year, according to state data from 2014 to 2023 obtained by Reuters through a Freedom of Information request. The US State Department considers Tamperias, where the 2 cities are located, to be the most dangerous state along the US-Mexico border. Facing record illegal border crossings, US President Joe Biden administration may move to a new system that required migrants to secure an appointment via a known app as a CBP1 to present themselves at a legal border crossing to enter the United States. 9 experts, including lawyers, medical professionals and aid workers, told Reuters that the new system has been unintended consequences in the 2 cities, contributing to a spike in violence. The high risk of kidnapping and sexual assault in Renera and Manamoros is one of the factors pushing migrants to cross illegally, 4 advocates said, crossing border-wide surge in September. Biden's officials said the new CBP policy is more humane because it reduces the need for migrants to pay smugglers and criminal groups to ferry them across the border illegally. The expert said many asylum seekers are no longer paying smugglers to get them across the border, instead travelling towards the frontier on their own, hoping to make an appointment on the app. But criminal groups are still demanding these migrants pay to enter the territory, the expert said. Rape is a part of the torture process to get the money, said Barbara Bermuatamba, a socialist of the New Mexico State University, researching the impacts of Biden's policy on migrants in the Tamaulipas. My apologies for mispronunciation of the words, guys. Yeah, I thought gangs would be involved. Yeah, the Gulf Cartel and the Northeast Cartel are both alive in the region and kidnap migrants for ransom, particularly those who arrive without smuggling protection. According to security analysis, Reuters were then able to contact the 2 groups. Yeah. Yeah, the Mexico just has too much. The cartel just have too much control in the country, and the government are very. You know, they've talked up in the past about doing more to crack down on the gangs and the drugs, and they've just not been able to get a grip on it in Mexico. Some migrants are spending more time in a dangerous region waiting to secure an appointment on the app. Tens of thousands of people a day are competing for 1,450 slots, according to US Customs and Border Protection, the CBP. A senior CBP official based in Washington said it was troubled by reports of migrants sexually assaulted in the 2 cities. It's absolutely something we're concerned about, said the official who requested autonomy as a condition of the interview. US authorities temporarily suspended CBP1 appointments in June in another Tamaulipas border city. Navio Lagalo due to extortion and kidnapping concerns, the official said. However, Miranda, DHS spokesperson, said the administration policies make it unnecessary to wait at the border since migrants could book an appointment from other parts of central and northern Mexico. Rather than them having to be at these cities, why they have to be at a specific place to get this app? It should be something working in conjunction with. It needs to be in places where they are least likely to be targeted by gangs and smugglers. It should not be the case that it's just by cities close to the borders. It's way too dangerous for them. They need to I think they do need to rethink it a little bit here, like this, because these are innocent people who are being targeted here. We speak about the migrations taking place in Middle East and in Africa. We don't often talk about the migrations taking place here from those coming from South America up through Mexico to cross the border, and what they have to go through to try and get to America. And they go through hell just as much. And the problem is Mexico can only control so much. So I'd like to think that the UN would do more, but it's frustrating to say the least. More than 250,000 migrants have had scheduled appointments on the CPP One app, and over 200,000 Cubans, Haitis, Nicaraguans and Venezuelans have entered the United States by air under a separate Biden humanitarian group, according to the CBT statistics. Catalina said she arrived in Venezuela on the 9th of May 26 on a commercial bus with her 13-year-old son. Men began training them as soon as they arrived at the bus station, she said. They said they wouldn't be here without their permission, she said, speaking from Chicago. The US State Department warned that criminal groups in Tunisia target buses, often taking passengers and demanding ransom payments. The men whisked Caroline away to a house where she and other migrants were raped. She said she was freed after family members paid $3,100 in ransom. Veterans were unable to independently verify the payment. She did not report the attack to the police, saying she saw no point. An Ecuadorian woman said that while in captivity in Venezuela, her kidnappers repeatedly allowed a drug dealer to rape her in exchange for his deliveries of a white powder while she suspected was cocaine. One night she clutched the figure of her crushed child, tiptoed her past a sleeping cactus and escaped through the window. I still have nightmares, she said, speaking from New Jersey in August. Reuters is withholding the full names of the survivors at their request to corroborate their accounts. Reuters reviews medical and psychological reports, criminal complaints and legal declarations, financial records, photos and videos supplied by the survivors' attorneys and advocates. Of course, you're not going to put this out to public, obviously. The State Attorney General's office has opened up 7 rape investigations of foreign women in the first half of 2023. 4 were opened in July alone. Only one of the 8 survivors Reuters interviewed reportedly the attacks to the authorities, a Honduran woman who said she was raped inside a migrant camp in Matamoros in late May. No one has been arrested, authorities said. No, nothing's been done. Olivia Limas, head of Tanzania's Human Rights Commission, said official data represents a fraction of the cases. Migrants are afraid to file reports, Limas said. The fact that there aren't more reports doesn't mean that this crime isn't occurring. Mexico's National Migrations Agency, Tamaulipas Security Agency, and Mexico's Foreign Ministry did not answer questions about sexual violence against migrants. Duran Rodriguez, head of the Tamaulipas Migrant Service Agency, said that the agency was attentive to the issue. Unfortunately, sometimes things happen, we can't deny it. A Venezuelan migrant said he was kidnapped in May in Venezuela by cartel while travelling to the border for his confirmed CBP One appointment. He couldn't raise the full $800 ransom, so he was forced to work for 2 months to pay off the remaining $200, he said. 2 other migrants who said they were held at a house during the same period confirmed the man was forced to work against his will and that they heard female migrants being raped. On the night, a Venezuelan man was tasked with standing guard over other migrants. He said he watched the cartel members ask the man in charge of the house for permission to rape the women of their choosing. He said the answer was always the same: take her. The story has been rectified to remove a duplicate dateline. this is pretty horrifying. It's incredibly horrifying to hear these stories. I can't imagine what those people have to go through to try and get to the US. It's horrifying, guys. It's absolutely horrifying. I just wish more was done to protect human rights. I really do, guys. My absolute heart goes out to those people. It really does. It really does. And I just wish more could be done. But as I said, Mexico does not have the power. They don't have enough authority to stop these gangs. As I've already said, guys, there's far too much corruption taking place in Mexico. And for those travelling from South America up, it's a very dangerous road for them. And unfortunately, it comes with huge risks. And I wish I could say there was a safe route for them, but it doesn't appear to be the case at all. So guys, we've got one more story to cover. We're going to be, it's been a while since I've covered the Sudan, but this is one of the latest ones from Middle East now. So it's the last story of the day, guys. So Sudan, the revolutionaries fighting alongside the army against the rapid support forces. The Sudanese armed forces are now training an army radical Democrats who are fighting alongside the ultra conservatives. So radical Democrat activists who face violent suppression at the hands of Sudan's military are now fighting alongside the army in its war against the rapid support forces, the RSF paramilitary. The Middle East Eye has learned. Young Sudanese belonging to the radical democratic group that ousted the former autocrat Omar al-Bashir are going into battle alongside younger fighters connected to the Sudanese Islamic movement, the SIM, that backed him, according to the sources from both sides. The development marks a significant new turn in the war, which has been raging since April the 15th, when fighting broke out between the armies led by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and the RSF led by Mohammed Ahmed Diago, the general better known as Hemdi. Members of the Resistance Committee, the nationwide collection of local groups that have been at the forefront of Sudan's democratic revolution, and other radical youth organisations such as Anger Without Borders and the Kings of Clashes joined military training camps opened in Bahrain in June, when he called on Sudan's youth to join the army ranks in the Battle of Dignity. At the same time, a military group called Al-Bakr bin Amake, my apologies if I mispronounce names, guys, named after the hero of the early Muslim conquest initiated by the Prophet Muhammad, had declared that it is fighting alongside the army against what it describes as a treacherous rebellion of the RSF. In the past, guys, we reported that the RSF had been doing some stealing, raping and bit of pillaging, allegedly, in certain towns and cities. They had vehemently denied that, but there were stories a while back of cases of it happening. I don't know if it's still happening now. But they are looking more and more like the bad guys in this war. Analysis believe that the widespread violations committed by the paramilitary in Khartoum, particularly with the occupation of houses, looting and the raping of women, there we go, are the main reasons driving such disparity groups to fight alongside the army. The RSF has denied committing such violence and says that the Al-Bahar bin Malik Brigade is made up of the remnants of Bashir's ousted administration. Others said that Sudan Islamic movement, which is behind the military coup that installed Bashir as president in 1989, is using the army to pave its way back into power. 3 members of the radical democratic group Anger Without Borders, which has previously clashed violently with Sudan police, security forces and other associates of Bashir's ousted administration, told Milis Tonight they recently joined the army's training camp and fought against the RSF. The activists who spoke on the condition of autonomy for security reasons said they were fighting alongside the army as a form of self-defense because of the violations perpetrated by the RSF. They said they were supporting lower-ranking officers and soldiers, but not the generals, who they charged with being involved in the killing of protesters and the undermining of democracy. We believe that this war was caused by a conflict of interest between the generals on both sides. We have witnessed and expressed widespread humiliations inflicted by RSF soldiers. one of the activists who has been injured by more than once while protesting since 2018, told Middle Eastern Eye. The activist who lives in Ramadan, Khartoum's twin city, said his colleagues have spent months inside their homes with very little food. I saw RSF making ordinary citizens carry their own possessions out of RSF trucks so they could carry the loot away. I'll never forget that, he said. We started to organise and protest outside from RSF violations. We did this without any real help from the SAF, which wasn't even in our neighbourhoods. So the story is simply about defending ourselves, our family, our properties from the RSF attacks. And our priority now is to expel the RSF from the Khartoum, the activist told Middle Eastern Eye. To do this, the activist trained at an army camp for a short period of time and fought with the army back in its neighbourhoods, which surrounded the popular market in Ottoman city. We got the weapons and stood with our SAF soldiers at the checkpoints in the night to stop RSF attacks on the neighbourhoods, he said. Joining the army is very easy. You just need to go to the nearest military camp to be trained. There are no conditions. Then you get a weapon, join any military unit to begin your duties, he said. Other resistance committee sources who is still fighting with the army in Ottoman's Awar neighbourhood told Middle Eastern Eye he spent a month being trained at Kari's military camp before going to man SAF checkpoints back in Ofrota. I saw hundreds of youths joining the camps and others finished their training and are now fighting for the army, he said. I have taken part in some battles against the RSF and I am proud of this experience because I am fighting for the dignity of our people, for the women and that have been raped and forced. So I can't show those pictures, guys, just in case, just because they may be too violent for YouTube. Some residents' committees in Khartoum stated other trade unions have declared their open support for the army. They referred to the RSF as foreign militias because they believe paramilitaries bring in the fighting from the Arab populations across countries like Chad and Niger. They said it's their duty to fight them. We are still against the top generals of the army and still against the old regime, but we believe that the army is supposed to be for the entire Sudanese population, and it is the duty of the National Army to protect its people, a collection of Khartoum residents' committees said in a recent statement. We are with the institution of the SAF, its lower ranking officers and the soldiers on the front line, whilst the generals still only want to stay in power, the statement continued. The counter-revolution. But Sudan's revolutionary movement is not uniting in its support of the army, participating in protests calling for a change. 18-year-old Noga Abou-Gaber has come face to face with the police and security forces on the streets of the country. She believes the army and the RSF are both counter-revolutionary powers opposed to the revolution and to democracy. Gala told MEE that fighting for the army was a personal decision and that revolutionary bodies had not decided to join the war. However, I also believe that some of the youth have witnessed the extreme violence attacks on their homes and rape of women, and they have no way of defending themselves, and the SAF is the only place you can easily get weapons and training for fighting, she said. Ahmed al-Bishar, founder of the Anger Without Borders, said no revolutionary institution had declared official support for the army, adding that there was an individual decision by those revolutionaries. He told Middle Eastern Eye it's not clear how many activists had joined the SAF, and that it was a tactical step by some democratic activists to protect themselves. This war is a clear conflict of interest between the generals on both sides, Abushra told MEE. This is why we have nothing to do with it. We are principally against the war in Sudan because peace is one of the main slogans of the revolution itself. But we are also against the violations of the RSF, militants and Bashir's deep state. Those democratic activists who have joined the army find themselves fighting alongside young Sudanese with very difficult political ideologies. The radical militants of the al-Bakr bin Amak and other similar groups have joined the army in large numbers. Sources in Sudan's Islamic group told Middle Eastern Eye that the militant group's presence in the army date back to the 1900s when he took part of the Popular Defence Forces, and paramilitary had close links to the National Islamic Front, itself closely connected to Bashir. The army officer corps were Islamic in the early 1990s after Bashir took power, when suspected oppositions were sacked or in many famous cases taken out of shop. Jill Lusk, an analysis on Sudan, told Middle Eastern Eye. The PDF was part of the Sudan forces that fought Sudan's People Liberation Army in the Second Sudanese Civil War, dissolved after the removal of Bashir. The PDF had been working underground and has been presented as an opportunity by the eruption of war. Sources inside the movement said the al-Bahir bin Mahal and the wider Islamic movement had been preparing its fight since 2019. They added that the militant groups had ties with some officers in Sudan's military intelligence, and they joined the war on the army side immediately after it broke out in April. The group fought beside the army and lost many fighters in the difficult locations since April, one source, who did not ask to be named for security reasons, told Police and I. One of the main battles that led to the death of many al-Bahar fighters was inside and around the military tank unit in Khartoum, the source said. Based on Middle East and I reading of the group's social media pages, it expelled a militant Islamic ideology that led by a young Sudan man called al-Bashar al-Basaid. Apologies for mispronunciation of the name, guys. A video posted on social media shows Bahrain visiting al-Basaid and embracing him at the hospital at the northeast city of Alba. The military leader had been evacuated there after being injured in the fighting in Khartoum. Other videos circulating on social media shows al-Basaid singing military slogans and calling for a jihad against the RSF. In his virtual address during the UN General Assembly meeting on Thursday, a meeting that Bahrain addressed in person, Hemley claimed that the Islamic State IS group and other associates of the Bahar administration were fighting alongside the army. In May, an RSF arrested a number of figures, including a prominent IS supporter, Mohammed Ali al-Jazuhi, who had promised to fight against the paramilitary. After he was captured, the RSF released a video of Jai talking about a secret plan coordinated by his group to fight alongside the army with the help of senior figures in Bashar's National Congress Party, the NCP, which is still officially banned in Sudan. Now in its 6th month, the war in Sudan has displaced about 5.3 million people within Sudan and neighbouring countries, according to the UN. I'd like to think that some of these youths are going to make the difference in this conflict, but the last time we talked about this, I made this point before, and I'm going to reiterate it again. Unless there are some big nations willing to get these people around the table, that this conflict is not going to end. We have two very obsessed generals desperate to seize power. It's these democratic activists who simply just want peace in their nation are joining the side of the army simply because they want this conflict to end, and they know it's hurting, and they know that the RSF are allegedly attacking and raping and pillaging women and stealing and whatnot. And it's obviously not a paid lie. They have vehemently denied this, but it is a worrying thing to say the least. As I said, the last time we spoke about any kind of peace or ceasefire deal was between the US and Saudi Arabia had tried to broker ceasefire deals. But as we can see in this report, this is the only report I've found anything regarding the Sudan lately. And again, nothing has changed. Nothing seems to have changed, guys. But it looks like a lot more young people are probably taking up arms from other activist backgrounds, joining the army, even though they don't really, from an ideological standpoint, don't want to, but feel that they have to. It's a necessity to protect themselves, to protect their country, to protect what they feel is right, even though they're fighting under a general who they don't want anything to do with. So it's a difficult situation to say the least, guys. So we've gone well over the hour mark again, so apologies for going over the hour mark, guys. If you have stayed with me all the way to the end, thank you very, very much. I really do appreciate it. My apologies for mispronunciations of names, you guys. I do try to work on the names, I really, really do. But let me know what you guys think of some of the stories and conflicts, issues that are taking place across the world. Interested to hear your thoughts. Let me know down in the comments below. Like, share and subscribe as always, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to catch you all very, very soon.